sir, I did not look so low. To conclude, this drudge or diviner laid claim to me, called me Dromio, swore I was assured to her, told me of what pretty marks I had about me, as the mark of my shoulder, the mole in my neck, the great wart on my left arm, that I, amazed, ran from her as a witch. And, I think, if my breast had not been made of faith and my heart of steel, she had transformed me to a curtal dog and made me turn at the wheel. As from a bear a man would run for life, so fly I from her that would be my wife. Comedy of Errors. That was a little prose monologue from Dromio of Syracuse, I believe. Is it Syracuse? I wrote it down. Yeah, Dromio of Syracuse. This is the second scene of Act 3. This is after, so the premise of Comedy of Errors, which is an early Shakespeare play, is a caper of mistaken identity that even for Shakespeare, which oftentimes kind of pushes the bounds of what you have to suspend your disbelief to get behind, is a story of two sets of twins separated at birth. Separated? Yeah, I think separated at birth. And these two sets of identical twins, one set shows up where the other live, and they get mistaken for each other throughout the day. So this is Dromio, the servant to Antipholus, both of Syracuse. Dromio has just come back from discovering that he has a wife, and that is to say, Dromio of Ephesus, I think is how you say it, has a wife who is his identical twin, who is married, who lives in this place. And he has just been mistaken for this woman's husband. And this has just been a back and forth exchange between Antipholus and Dromio, talking about all the things that he's observed about this woman who is his wife, who is a kitchen wench, and he describes her as round and spherical, and I'm not sure if Dromio is always played as like small, but in the I've seen a production of Comedy of Errors, and usually so Dromio is like the kind of the comic relief to the straight man of Antipholus. I mean, there's slapstick humor to all of them, but it's kind of they typically have like the lord or gentleman and their servant, and the servant is more crass and silly, and is oftentimes played either by someone young or small or something. I always feel, I don't know, in my head I always feel like there's a visual disparity between the gentleman and the servant, and the gentleman's a little taller and a little more austere, and then the servant is, maybe slighter. And so in my head, that's how I kind of picture Dromio, as this kind of like small guy, and then as he just describing this just enormous beast of a woman, as he calls her. This is kind of the tail end of it, and he talks about how she is telling him that I'm her husband, and she knew my name, and she even knew that I have a birthmark and a mole on my neck and a wart on my arm. And I mean, those are kind of like ridiculously silly to think of these identical twins having, but I mean, it's this really silly comedy. It's one of I think it is Shakespeare's shortest play by a decent margin, actually. And it's kind of just chaos, just 5 acts of chaos and silliness. You can see the twin mistaken identity thing played to better effect in a play like Twelfth Night. But that's what's so cool about looking at some of this earlier Shakespeare, is that you see the bones of a lot of his later work done in more success. So I do have fun going back to these earlier plays and seeing kind of the great things to come. And it's clear that he's just kind of like exploring and figuring out what his toolbox is from a playwriting standpoint. Um, so yeah, this is, I mean, so this is prose. There's not, rather, the most of this is prose. I took the rhyming couplet that Antipholus has a little interjection before. Um, Mostly, I think, in prose, but then he ends it with a rhyming couplet that is then echoed in a rhyming couplet by Dromio as they both exit the scene. So there's not too much to parse in terms of the scansion of the language, but it does have its kind of its own cadence. And one thing I find with these comedic prose monologues um, is that there's often lists that kind of like naturally build on themselves in incredulity or energy or whatever it may be. But you know, that was on display in this with the she called me by my name, she did this, she did that, she knew I had a birthmark. It's like, it's good, you know, and you just kind of, it naturally cascades into this like frenzy, which I think is cool because that's what is so great about the verse stuff that he writes, is that in the structure of the language you find tools to inform your emotions and energy. And that's not unique to verse though. He does that with prose too. He does that in the way that it's written and the structure and everything. So yeah, it's nice to do one of these little prose ones once in a while. So yeah, that was a comedy of errors. Um, Next week I'll go back to more sonnets. Yeah, I didn't do one last week. I was kind of on the tail end of recovering from a cold. So and I wanted to make sure I did it today because tomorrow's the Super Bowl, and I'm actually seeing the Celtics play tomorrow too, so it's like busy stuff. But I should be able to do one of these next weekend, and that will be Sonnet 70, if I'm not mistaken. Wow, 70. So yeah, thank you for watching.